He thought he married the love of his life. But 48 hours later, the FBI arrested her in her wedding dress. What they uncovered next was a web of lies, stolen identities, and a $300 million con targeting his entire family. My name is Audrey Hill. I'm 32 years old, married to Michael Mitchell for the past 5 years. We live in Chicago, where Michael works as an attending physician at Chicago Memorial, and I freelance as a digital consultant. Life has been mostly predictable, happy even, but nothing prepared me for what would unfold at my brother's wedding. My younger brother, Kyle, has always been more than just a sibling. He's been my best friend. When he announced he was getting married and invited us to his destination wedding in Napa Valley, Michael and I were thrilled. Kyle had always been the exuberant one, the golden boy of the family. At 30, he was successful, well-liked, and head over heels in love with a woman named Madison Wilson. They had met at a charity fundraiser in San Francisco less than a year ago. Their romance was a whirlwind, engaged in 5 months and now ready to tie the knot. We arrived at the Silverado Resort in Napa Valley on a warm Thursday afternoon, 3 days before the wedding. The estate Kyle had rented was stunning, sprawling vineyards, manicured gardens, and a breathtaking mountain view. My parents, Grace and Thomas Hill, were already there, chatting animatedly with Kyle on the steps of the main house. "There they are," Kyle shouted, bounding down the steps. He gave me a bear hug and greeted Michael with a firm handshake and half hug. "You guys are going to love Madison. She's incredible." I'd only met Madison twice, briefly at Christmas and again at their engagement party. Both times, she seemed polished, pleasant, and a little too perfect. But she made Kyle happy. And that was all that mattered, or so I thought. Our room in the estate was more luxurious than expected: a king-sized bed, a balcony overlooking the vineyards, and a bathroom larger than our first apartment. As I unpacked, Michael flopped onto the bed and said, "This place must be costing a fortune." "Madison's parents are covering most of it," I explained. "Her dad owns like half of Seattle." That evening's welcome dinner was held in the courtyard. Fairy lights twinkled overhead, and guests mingled over wine and otter. Madison wore a simple white cocktail dress and greeted us with a dazzling smile. "Audrey, I'm so happy you're here," she said, embracing me warmly. "Kyle says you two were inseparable growing up. I want to hear all the embarrassing stories." Something about her enthusiasm felt rehearsed, but I brushed it off as pre-wedding jitters. Throughout the evening, Madison was a social butterfly. She remembered everyone's names, charmed my parents, and made a special effort to connect with my father, a prominent investor. She asked thoughtful questions about his firm and seemed genuinely engaged. "She's quite the charmer," Michael whispered as we watched her laugh with my father. "She makes Kyle happy." "That's all that matters," I replied. The next morning was the rehearsal. Madison was a vision of efficiency, guiding everyone through the ceremony steps with military precision, cloaked in breezy charm. Later, I overheard her speaking harshly to someone on the phone, her voice clipped and cold. "I don't care what it takes, just handle it. We've come too far to mess this up now." When she noticed me in the hallway, her demeanor shifted instantly. "Minor flower emergency," she said with a laugh, holding a phone in a blue case. Oddly enough, I noticed her using a red-cased phone later that evening. "Wedding stress," I told myself at the rehearsal dinner. Madison gave a touching speech that brought tears to my mother's eyes. My father looked on approvingly. Everything seemed perfect. The next day included a champagne breakfast, fittings, and a wine tour. Madison continued to show signs of micro-controlling behavior. She subtly insulted bridesmaids under the guise of compliments, overruled stylists with tight smiles, and appeared increasingly tense after taking frequent calls on her ever-changing phones. During a conversation with Stephanie, her maid of honor, I mentioned Madison's Stanford MBA. Stephanie looked confused. "Stanford? I thought she went to UCLA. Maybe I'm mixing things up," she added quickly. Before I could press further, Madison appeared and redirected the conversation. That evening, Michael mentioned discrepancies in Madison's story about how she met Kyle. According to Kyle, it was at a charity auction. According to one of Madison's friends, it was over spilled coffee in a cafe. "Maybe they're remembering different encounters," I said, though unease twisted in my stomach. On the wedding day, Madison gifted me a pearl bracelet as thanks for welcoming her into the family. I felt guilty for my doubts. The ceremony was beautiful. Kyle's face glowed with adoration. But at the reception, I noticed Madison's peculiar effort to keep my father engaged with her father. a man with a piercing gaze and a suspiciously vague background. They discussed investment strategies in detail, including proprietary methods my father had never shared publicly. Michael began taking quiet photos, documenting interactions and inconsistencies. When I asked why, he said, "Just memories." But his tone told another story. The next morning at brunch, Michael was withdrawn, checking his phone constantly and taking brief calls. When he returned from one, he leaned in close and whispered, "We need to leave now." "What are you talking about?" I whispered back, "You didn't notice. The bride, she's not who she says she is." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" Michael looked at me, his voice grave. "Madison Wilson doesn't exist. Your brother married a con artist." The drive from Napa to the nearby town passed in tense silence. Audrey sat stiffly in her seat, staring out the window as the vineyards rolled by. Her mind was reeling from everything Michael had just revealed. The woman her brother had married, the woman they had all welcomed into their family, was a complete fabrication. A predator. Once checked into a modest hotel under a different name, Michael wasted no time coordinating their next steps. He contacted his friend in private security while Audrey called Jen, a longtime family friend and cybersecurity expert who owed her father a favor. Jen agreed to check if Thomas Reynolds' computer systems had been accessed without authorization. "Something isn't adding up," Audrey said as she paced the room. She was too smooth, too precise. "All those moments I dismissed. I feel like an idiot now." "You're not," Michael replied. "She's had years to perfect this. Most people would have fallen for it." 2 hours later, Jen called back. Her voice was tight. "Someone installed a keylogger on your dad's laptop. It's been capturing everything: logins, financial info, emails. The intrusion came from a device using the same Wi-Fi network at the estate. So, someone is physically present." Audrey's stomach dropped. "Did you disable it?" "Yes, and I've changed all the critical passwords. But whoever did this has already gathered a lot." Michael's expression darkened when Audrey relayed the update. "We have to go back now. Tonight. Before she gets away with anything." They packed quickly and drove back under the cover of darkness. Audrey texted Kyle, asking him to meet them in the library alone. No context, just urgency. When he arrived, his expression was a mix of worry and irritation. "What's going on?" Kyle asked. "Why did you disappear? And what's with the cryptic messages?" Audrey and Michael looked at each other. She took a deep breath. "Kyle, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound crazy. But you need to listen. We have proof that Madison isn't who she says she is." Kyle's face hardened. "Excuse me." Michael stepped forward and opened his laptop. "Madison Wilson doesn't exist. She's been using fake identities for years. She's wanted for questioning in multiple states. Marriage fraud, financial theft. She's a con artist." Kyle let out a sharp laugh. "This is insane. You've lost it. Madison loves me." "Please," Audrey pleaded. "Just look at the evidence." Over the next 20 minutes, they showed him photos, legal documents, financial reports, and details about Madison's Alexandra's past identities. Audrey watched the color drain from Kyle's face with each new revelation. This can't be real," he said, voice hollow. "I've lived with her. I would have known." "She's very good," Michael said gently. "She's done this before. Married men, infiltrated families, then vanished with their money." Kyle sat heavily on the couch, scrolling through the files in stunned silence. Just then, the door creaked open. "What's going on in here?" a familiar voice asked. Madison. She stood in the doorway, her brows drawn together in concern. Behind her, Thomas lingered, clearly sensing something was wrong. "You all disappeared after dinner," she said. "Is everything all right?" Kyle looked at Audrey. She gave him a small nod. "Dad, come in," Kyle said. "You need to hear this. It's about Madison." Thomas frowned. "What do you mean?" Michael walked him through everything. The spyware on his laptop, the unauthorized access, the history of fraud. At first, Thomas was furious at them, but as Michael pulled up proof of the keylogger and unauthorized logins to his financial accounts, that anger shifted by the end. His face was pale and grim. "We need to confront her," Thomas said. "Now. Before she takes another step. Let's involve the authorities," Michael suggested. "Not yet," Thomas replied. "I want to hear it from her." Kyle stood abruptly. "I want to be the one to talk to her. Alone." "No," Audrey said firmly. "She's dangerous, Kyle. She's my wife, he said. Or at least I thought she was. I need to hear her admit it. Eventually, they reached a compromise. Madison would be confronted in the suite with everyone present. Thomas insisted that Grace, their mother, be there as well. She deserved to know the truth. Audrey sent Madison a message. Family emergency. Please come to my parents' suite. Madison arrived 10 minutes later. Dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, her hair tied back. She looked like any concerned wife stepping into a family issue. What's wrong? She asked. Is everyone okay? The room was silent for a moment before Kyle stepped forward. We know, Madison, he said quietly. Or should I say Erica? Or Catherine? Which name do you prefer? For a heartbeat, her expression faltered just a flicker. Then came the confusion. Kyle, what are you talking about? You're scaring me. Michael clicked open his laptop. We have documentation. Marriage certificates. Fraud reports. You've done this before. Madison laughed, a short, forced sound. You've got the wrong person. Some woman who looks like me, maybe. We also have evidence that was installed on my computer, Thomas said, stepping forward. Someone tried to steal from me. Her eyes narrowed. That's absurd. Don't try to run, Audrey warned. Security knows not to let you leave. A bluff but a good one. I don't know what this is, Madison said, her voice, sharp now, losing the honeyed warmth, but it ends now, Kyle. I want to believe you, Kyle said, eyes glistening. But explain the marriage certificate from Boston. Laurence Peton. Erika Donovan. Silence. Then Madison's mask shattered her. Posture shifted. Her accent slightly changed. Well, she said coolly, this is certainly unexpected. She glanced at Michael. You're smarter than you look. Dr. Grace gasped. Kyle stepped back. Why? Kyle asked, his voice cracking. Was any of it real? You were kind, she replied. I didn't hate being with you. But business is business. You call this business? Thomas demanded. Defrauding families, lying your way into our lives. She smiled. Wealth redistribution. I take from those with too much and enjoy life. You won't get away with this, Audrey said. I already have, she replied. You can't prosecute someone for loving too well, and Kyle signed a prenup. One built on fraud, Michael said. No court will uphold it. Madison's confidence wavered. Even so, do you want this public? Imagine the headlines. Prominent Chicago investor fooled by fake heiress. Clients won't trust you. They all went silent. She was right, the scandal could destroy reputations. But then Kyle spoke, voice steelier than before. The other men you conned might have stayed silent, but together. That's federal territory. Madison's eyes flared. Actually, Thomas said, pulling out his phone, while we've been talking, I've notified the FBI. They're very interested in meeting you. He held up a confirmation email. You're bluffing. Try me. Real fear cracked through Madison's mask. She looked at Kyle, desperate. We could have been happy. He shook his head. None of it was real. Moments later, local authorities called quietly by Thomas's team arrived with an FBI liaison. Madison Petrovic was taken into custody. Kyle collapsed into a chair, staring at the door she had walked through only hours ago as his wife. The damage wasn't over, but a beginning had been made. The hours after Madison Alexandra was taken into custody were a haze of flashing police lights, whispered conversations behind closed doors, and a house once filled with joy now cloaked in tension and betrayal. The estate, still adorned with remnants of wedding decorations, white roses, crystal place cards, champagne flutes, had become the backdrop for a criminal investigation. Kyle sat in the corner of the study, unmoving. He hadn't spoken a word since the FBI left with Madison in handcuffs. Audrey stood nearby, watching her brother with the protective caution of someone witnessing a soul fracture in real time. I should have seen it, he finally whispered, his voice barely audible. She was in my life every day. And I didn't see it. Audrey knelt beside him, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. None of us did, Kyle. She fooled all of us. She made sure of it, but I let her in, he said, eyes glassy. Into our family. Into Dad's business. Into you. She used me as a weapon against the people I loved. She used everyone. It was Michael who spoke now, leaning against the fireplace, arms crossed. You were her target, but all of us were her marks. She studied us for months, maybe years. We found the files. The files? Audrey asked. Michael gave a slow nod. One of the FBI agents just called me. They searched the storage unit she rented under one of her aliases. It had binders, labeled with our names, timelines, photos, password hints, voice memos, even handwriting samples. Audrey felt a cold spread through her chest. How long has she been planning this? At least 18 months, Michael said. She picked Kyle out intentionally, and she didn't work alone. The people who posed as her family. The FBI has names for a few, but most disappeared right after the wedding. They're professionals. Some have ties to international fraud networks. Kyle didn't react. His gaze remained locked on a photo on the mantel, a picture taken just before the wedding. He and Madison, smiling beneath the floral archway, the vineyard behind them, happiness frozen in time. Now nothing more than a lie. The following day was worse. The press hadn't caught on to the story yet, thanks to Thomas's PR team, but whispers were already circling among business associates and distant relatives who had attended the wedding. A sanitized explanation was offered. Madison had misrepresented her past, and Kyle had chosen to annul the marriage. Most accepted it without question, but the real damage was internal. Thomas sat at his desk reviewing financial accounts, checking every single line with the precision of a man who'd been burned. She was seconds away from draining 7 accounts, he muttered. 7. Audrey, if you and Michael hadn't acted when you did, she'd have vanished with millions. Audrey finished. We know, damn it, Thomas said, slamming the drawer shut. I've spent my life analyzing risk, vetting investments, reading people, and I let this happen in my own home. She was trained to disarm people like you, Michael said calmly. People who are confident, successful, trusting, especially with those they think are vetted by family. Thomas exhaled and looked at them. What happens next? The FBI wants formal statements from everyone, Audrey said. They're coordinating with Interpol now. Madison Alexandra's tied to several scams across Europe. Thomas looked toward the hallway, where Kyle's room remained dark and closed. And what about him? Audrey shook her head. He's not ready. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. Kyle barely spoke. He had moved back into the house. Unable to return to the San Francisco apartment he had shared with Madison, Grace brought him food. Audrey tried to get him to go outside. Michael arranged for a trauma counselor to visit, but Kyle floated in silence, numb and disoriented. It wasn't until 3 weeks later, while sitting in the garden, that he finally spoke again. I don't know who I am without her, he told Audrey. Isn't that ridiculous? She wasn't even real, but she built herself around what I wanted. She gave me comfort, connection, and intimacy. Now I don't know what any of those things are. You're still you, Audrey said softly. You always were. She didn't take that from you. She just covered it with illusion. Kyle let the silence linger before saying, I don't think I can ever trust anyone again. Audrey didn't try to argue. She knew that trust wasn't something you repaired overnight, but healing had to start somewhere. Meanwhile, the FBI case grew larger. The task force had linked Alexandra to at least 5 similar operations across the U.S., one in Miami, one in Atlanta, one in Seattle, one in Denver, and another in Toronto. In each case, the pattern was the same. A charming, mysterious woman who swept into the life of a wealthy man, married quickly, and nearly pulled off high-stakes fraud before vanishing. In some instances, she had succeeded, but others, like Kyle, had been spared at the last moment. Audrey received a call from one of those men, Ethan Miles, an entrepreneur from Seattle. He'd seen her name on a list of people connected to the case and reached out. She was Erica to me, he said. She told me she worked in international development, fluent in 6 languages. She even had a fake diploma from Princeton. She told Kyle she was Madison Wilson, Audrey replied. She's terrifying, Ethan said. But I'm glad you stopped her. Maybe now she finally faced justice. Justice. That word meant different things to different people. To Audrey, justice would be Kyle, smiling again. 2 months after the arrest, Kyle began therapy in earnest. It started with silent sessions. Then came small admissions, guilt, shame, rage. Then came the dreams. I keep dreaming, she's still here. Kyle told his therapist that she knocked on the door and said it was all a mistake. That she loved me, and I believe her. Every time. Even in the dream, I believe her. That's your trauma talking, the therapist said. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. Bit by bit, Kyle clawed his way back to himself. He cut ties with old friends who had mocked his pain. He reconnected with others who showed compassion. He started volunteering part-time at a youth mentorship program, a place where he could share hard-earned lessons with people still figuring out who they wanted to be. 6 months after the wedding, that never was, Kyle moved into a new apartment in Chicago. He found a job at a tech firm downtown, doing something familiar: data analytics. He was good at it, focused, reliable. He smiled more now, though it still didn't always reach his eyes. One day, Audrey visited him after work. They walked along the lakefront, the late summer breeze cooling their skin. "I have a date next week," Kyle said out of nowhere. Audrey blinked. "Really? It's just coffee," he said quickly. "Someone from the office. She's funny, smart, doesn't remind me of her. That's important." Audrey squeezed his hand. "That's more than coffee, Kyle. That's hope." The Chicago courtroom buzzed with quiet anticipation. Reporters lined the back wall, pens poised, as attorneys shuffled papers and exchanged last-minute glances. The name Alexandra Petrovic had been whispered through legal and financial circles for months now. The woman once known to the Reynolds family as Madison Wilson was finally facing justice. Kyle sat in the second row behind the prosecution, flanked by Audrey, Michael, and their parents. He looked composed, but Audrey could see the tension in his clenched jaw, the rigid set of his shoulders. This wasn't just a trial, it was the final confrontation with the ghost of a life he never really had. As Alexandra was led into the courtroom, dressed in a plain navy jumpsuit, her eyes swept over the crowd. She didn't smile, didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge Kyle. Her cool detachment was unnerving but expected. The prosecution opened with precision, presenting a timeline of Alexandra's scams: 5 aliases, 6 known victims, over $18 million in attempted fraud, and 1 storage unit filled with chilling evidence: meticulously labeled files, burner phones, false documents, even scripts she'd used to deceive her marks. Her web of lies had spanned continents and nearly succeeded in dismantling powerful families. Kyle was called to testify on the second day. As he walked to the stand, Audrey held her breath. "Can you describe your relationship with the defendant?" the prosecutor asked. Kyle nodded slowly. "She told me her name was Madison Wilson. We were together for 11 months. Engaged for 3. Married for 48 hours. Laughter rippled from a reporter's row but was quickly silenced by the judge's gavel. Kyle continued. "She presented herself as someone warm, generous, and devoted to family. I introduced her to mine. She attended holidays, celebrated birthdays. She read books my mother loved just to connect with her. She created a perfect persona." He paused, his voice steady despite the emotion rising beneath it. "And it was all a lie. And what effect has this had on your life, Mr. Reynolds?" Kyle swallowed hard. "It shattered my trust, my sense of judgment. I questioned everything, even my relationship with my own family, but it also forced me to rebuild from the ground up, and I'm stronger for it now." Alexandra remained impassive, her gaze fixed somewhere over Kyle's head. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Witness after witness testified: victims, cybersecurity experts, even members of Alexandra's former crew who'd turned state's evidence in exchange for lighter sentences. Each painted a picture of a brilliant, ruthless woman who weaponized charm and intellect for personal gain. Audrey and Michael stayed in Chicago for the entire trial. Grace and Thomas attended every session. The family, once blindsided and broken, now stood united in determination. When the verdict was read guilty on all counts, there was no celebration, just a collective exhale. Alexandra would face a minimum of 25 years in federal prison, with additional charges pending internationally. Kyle didn't look at her as she was led away. She didn't look at him. It was over. In the months that followed, life began to feel normal again. Kyle moved into a sunlit apartment near the lake, decorated sparsely but warmly. He resumed hiking, joined a local soccer league, and eventually began dating again. Nothing serious, just steps forward. Audrey and Michael, now expecting their first child, spent weekends with Kyle and their parents, restoring rituals lost during the chaos of the previous year. Grace had found a new passion for painting, often capturing emotional, abstract portraits. Thomas, ever the pragmatist, doubled down on cybersecurity protocols and donated generously to anti-fraud nonprofits. During a quiet dinner one evening, Kyle raised a glass. "I used to think the worst part of what she did was the lie," he said, his voice calm. "But the worst part was how I almost let it destroy everything good in my life: my family, my values, my ability to hope." He looked at Audrey. You reminded me that love isn't just about romance. It's about the people who hold you up when you fall. Audrey wiped a tear, smiling. And you've stood back up, Kyle. Taller than before. Kyle stood at the front of a modest community center, a circle of young adults watching him intently. She called herself Madison, he said, but her real name was Alexandra. She wasn't who she claimed to be, and for a long time, I blamed myself for not seeing it. But healing starts when we stop asking why it happened and start asking what we'll do next. The room was silent. He looked at the faces young professionals, many recovering from manipulative relationships, gaslighting, and betrayal. This was his volunteer group now, a peer support circle, a place to use his story to help others. You're not broken, he said, you're rebuilding. And that's strength. Afterward, a young woman approached. Your story gave me hope, she said quietly. Thank you. Kyle nodded. We all come through the fire differently, but we come through. The name Alexandra Petrovic faded from the headlines but remained etched in Kyle's past. Every once in a while, he'd get a letter from the FBI updating him on developments, extradition attempts, recovered funds, other arrests tied to the fraud ring, but he no longer felt haunted. Instead, he felt free, and one crisp spring morning, walking through Lincoln Park with someone real, he realized something powerful. He had been deceived by a master manipulator. But she hadn't destroyed him. She had only revealed just how strong-handed his family truly were.